Diane Henderson stood at her living room window, gazing through the lace curtains at the house next door. The moving truck had just rumbled away, leaving a scattering of packed boxes and furniture along the driveway. She watched the new neighbors, a young couple carrying armloads of belongings inside. Their shouts of laughter as they maneuvered a couch around the narrow front door caused Diane to smile. It reminded her of the hustle and excitement her own family had felt when they first moved in 8 years ago. Though she had cultivated meaningful friendships in the neighborhood, there was something lonely about the passing of time. Her daughter Caroline had gone away to college last year, and the house often felt quiet without her. Diane's husband, Robert, worked long hours at the office, especially now that Caroline's tuition bills needed to be paid. She missed the buzz of shared dinners, the silly arguments, and the sweet family traditions. Watching the neighbors so busy and hopeful, Diane felt a small kindling of curiosity. Maybe they had children, or maybe they'd be open to new friendships. Gathering her courage, she decided she would walk over later in the afternoon to welcome them. That evening, after finishing up the dishes, Diane glanced at the clock. 7:30, still early enough to be decent. She poked her head into the study, where Robert was going through a stack of papers. "I'm taking over a plate of cookies to the new neighbors," she announced. Robert nodded, absently, already buried in employee performance reports. Placing freshly baked snickerdoodles in a plastic container, Diane stepped into the cool October air and made her way next door. A young woman opened the door before Diane could knock. She was tall, with warm brown eyes and curly hair that framed her face. "Hi," she greeted cheerfully, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. "I saw you walking up, so I thought I'd save you the trouble of knocking." Diane smiled brightly, extending the container. "Thank you. I'm Diane Henderson from next door. I just wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood." "It's so nice to meet you, Diane," the woman replied. "I'm Zoe, and my husband is Oliver. We can't tell you how thrilled we are to be here. Please, come in." Zoe led Diane inside, where Oliver was wrestling an oversized painting onto the wall. He turned, huffing, and pushed his hair from his eyes. When he spotted Diane, he broke into a friendly grin. "Thanks for stopping by. We're still a bit of a mess, but we're excited to meet neighbors." "Cookies? Wow, that's amazing. Please tell me they're chocolate chip," he teased. Diane laughed softly. "They're snickerdoodles. But next time, Oliver, I promise chocolate chip." Once the polite introductions were over, they all settled briefly in the living room. The boxes stacked precariously in the corner hinted at the enormous amount of unpacking ahead, so Diane didn't plan to linger. She learned that Zoe and Oliver had recently relocated for Zoe's new job as a high school guidance counselor, and Oliver was a freelance graphic designer hoping to start his own business in the new town. They also mentioned a baby on the way. Zoe was 3 months pregnant and thrilled at the idea of raising a child in a quieter community. Before leaving, Diane offered more than a polite neighborly farewell. "If you need anything, a grocery store recommendation, a place to rest, or just some company, please don't hesitate to knock on our door," she said, remembering the overwhelming chaos of unpacking. Zoe pressed her hands together gratefully. "You're truly a lifesaver, Diane. Thank you." The following Saturday dawned crisp and golden, with autumn leaves swirling across the neatly trimmed lawns. Diane had just poured her morning coffee when she realized she had left her gardening spade in a patch of chrysanthemums near the far edge of her yard. With a sigh, she pulled on her jacket and headed outside. As she walked toward her garden bed, she heard faint voices coming from beyond the row of hedges that marked the boundary between her yard and Zoe and Oliver's property. Curiosity got the better of her. Carefully, she parted a few branches to peek through. She could make out Zoe, standing with her arms crossed, gazing downward. Oliver was by her side, scratching his head. Following the direction of their looks, Diane caught a glimpse of an old, circular stone structure, partially hidden by vines. She realized that must be the abandoned well, the one that had been on both properties since long before the subdivision was built. She remembered hearing stories about it from the previous owners, but had never bothered exploring the overgrown area. Diane stepped around the hedges, calling out a gentle greeting so as not to startle them. Zoe and Oliver turned, startled at the sight of their neighbor. Oh, Diane, hi. Zoe's voice lifted cheerfully. We found this old well in between our yards. It's like discovering buried treasure. Oliver nodded, tugging at the ivy that clung to the worn stone. We were just thinking how odd it is to have this on the property line. Do you happen to know anything about it? Diane recalled the story she'd heard years ago. It was supposedly a wishing well back in the early 1900s, she explained. They say an old couple refused to tear it down when the neighborhood was built because of some local legend. It granted wishes or something. They eventually sold the land, but the well stayed. It's mostly dried up now, though. They all walked around it, peeking inside. The well was beautiful in its own rustic way, with smooth stones forming a neat circle to about waist height. Then an old wooden frame overhead where the rope and bucket once hung. Now, bits of dried leaves and debris had collected inside, and the wooden cover was half rotted. As silly as it sounds, Zoe said, her eyes bright with curiosity. Maybe we could fix it up a bit. Think of it as a fun little project for the neighborhood. Could be a whimsical decoration if nothing else. Diane smiled at the idea. Why not? Though we're likely to just find more leaves than magic in there. Still, it might be nice to restore this old relic. Oliver's grin widened. Hey, if the legend is true, maybe we could all make a wish. See whose might come true first. Zoe placed a loving hand on her belly. I already know my wish, as crazy as it seems, but it's never too early to start wishing for good things for our child. Under the morning sunlight, the three neighbors decided they would spend the next few weekends restoring the well. Over the coming days, they poured their hearts into removing tangled vines, cleaning away the debris, and adding a fresh coat of protectant to the wooden beam. Oliver sanded down the splintered edges, and Diane planted bright marigolds around the perimeter to give it a fresh, colorful look. As they worked together, a gentle camaraderie formed between the Hendersons and their new neighbors. In the weeks that followed, Zoe and Oliver settled more deeply into the neighborhood. Zoe found her role at the local high school both rewarding and demanding. Every day, she met teenagers juggling academic stress and personal dilemmas. She found purpose in helping them chart a hopeful path toward their futures, though it often left her exhausted by day's end. Oliver was making steady progress establishing his freelance design business, gaining a few local clients after leaving his business cards at nearby coffee shops and grocery stores. One late afternoon, Diane was outside tending her marigolds when she heard a car pull into Zoe and Oliver's driveway. She glanced up to find Zoe stepping out of the car, shoulders drooping. Concerned, Diane waved hello. Zoe returned the gesture, though her usual vibrant energy seemed absent. After parking, Zoe made her way over to the well where Diane was removing a few wilted leaves. Long day? Diane asked gently, setting down her little gardening rake. Zoe exhaled, brushing a stray curl from her face. You have no idea. We had a student meltdown today. Poor kid is anxious about college applications, scholarships, how to pay for everything. It pulls at my heartstrings, especially now as I think about my own child's future. Diane nodded sympathetically. Caroline's in her first year here, and I remember how terrifying the financial side felt when we started. It gets better, though, and there are always ways to help. A kind counselor makes a difference. Zoe gave a sad smile and rested a hand on the well's edge. Diane noticed the press of her lips, as if she were weighing words in her mind. Then, Zoe cleared her throat. I actually came out here a few nights ago, just to stare at the stars and think. I couldn't help but drop a penny in, she admitted sheepishly, glancing at the well. I made a wish that I could make a bigger difference, that I could find a way to help the kids who can't afford the advice, the classes, the exam fees. I'm not sure how to do it, but that's my wish. Touched by the sincerity in Zoe's voice, Diane reached over and squeezed her hand. Well, you never know how these silly legends can come true, she said, smiling softly. We'll figure something out. Just then, Robert emerged from the Henderson home, tie askew and briefcase in his hand. He looked worn down but mustered a wave. Diane invited him over, introducing him properly to Zoe. After brief pleasantries, Robert admired the well and teased about tossing in a coin of his own someday, but Diane caught a flicker of stress in his eyes. She could guess what he might wish for: a relief from mounting bills or perhaps just a moment of peace. Later that week, Oliver returned from printing business flyers at a local copy shop, looking more discouraged than usual. He had spent a significant part of their savings on new promotional materials, hoping to draw in more clients. Yet calls were trickling in at a snail's pace. That evening, after Zoe had gone to bed, Oliver wandered outside. He found himself standing at the wishing well, the moon casting gentle shadows across the stones. In his exhaustion, he dug into his pocket for a quarter and stared at it in his open palm. Instead of making a silent wish, Oliver spoke softly under his breath. Please help me grow my business so I can support my family with pride. He tossed the quarter, which landed with a gentle clink onto the well's stone base, sliding out of sight. For a moment, Oliver stood there, letting his shoulders relax. He knew it was just an old, probably empty well, but some small part of him felt that by giving voice to that wish, he'd set something in motion. That same night, Diane awoke and found Robert at the kitchen table, poring over spreadsheets lit only by the glow of his laptop screen. Quietly, she approached, slipping her arms around his shoulders. "Come to bed," she murmured. "It's late." He rubbed his eyes. "I'm missing something in these numbers, Dee. We need to free up some finances for Caroline's tuition, but the mortgage is fixed. The costs for the roofing job last month were more than anticipated, and we haven't even touched the medical bills from that sprain I had." Diane felt that familiar seed of worry bloom in her chest. She guided his face toward hers, offering a feeble smile. "We'll figure it out. We always do." But in the back of her mind, she saw that old well perched between the yards. She wondered if maybe a coin of her own might bring some sense of hope, if nothing else. Sunday arrived with a promise of bright skies and brisk winds. Diane and Zoe decided to bake cookies together. Zoe had been craving them nonstop since the snickerdoodles on moving day. Meanwhile, Oliver and Robert ended up chatting about business and financial strategies in the Hendersons' living room. Robert offered insights from his corporate job, suggesting local networking events Oliver might attend. Oliver, in turn, opened up about his desire to expand, but fear of taking on too much risk. The conversation meandered into dreams of future families, retirement plans, and everything in between. Hmm, Isn't that interesting?" Robert said at one point, leaning back on the sofa. "We might actually help each other figure out these money woes. You need more exposure for your business. I know a colleague who's looking for freelance design work for his startup. Meanwhile, I might be able to pick up a second contract job on weekends." Oliver nodded excitedly. "We could trade websites for financial advice," he suggested with a grin. "Help each other out, neighbor to neighbor." It's funny how we were both up at night worrying about bills. In the kitchen, Diane and Zoe were having their own exchange of ideas. Diane was an active volunteer at the local community center. Zoe tapped into that knowledge. "What if?" she mused. "I host workshops at the community center for high school students who need help with college applications and financial aid forms. We could make it free or super cheap so the kids who need it can come. It would be the perfect place to redirect them." Diane's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. I know the director there. I'm sure we could schedule some regular afternoon sessions. It might become a real lifeline for kids who could never afford private counseling." Zoe's whole face glowed as she realized she might have stumbled onto the solution to her heartfelt wish for more impact. The women grinned at each other. In that moment, they realized a pattern was forming. They all had intangible wishes, fed by worry and anxiety. In discovering the old wishing well, they were each finding new ways to address those dreams together. Within a month, Zoe's Pathways to College workshops kicked off at the community center. Dozens of teenagers showed up, both from her own school and neighboring districts, all hungry for advice on essays, scholarship research, and admissions testing. Some kids arrived wearing secondhand clothes and worn-out backpacks, proving Zoe's suspicion that in this small town, there were plenty of young people in need. Diane volunteered to greet the students at the front desk, ensuring they felt welcome. She also baked cookies, sorting them onto trays to keep morale high. Along with a few other teacher volunteers, Zoe and her small staff walked the kids step by step through filling out online applications, searching for scholarships, and preparing personal statements. Word spread fast about the sessions, and soon the community center had to open a second conference room to accommodate everyone. Meanwhile, Oliver's graphic design business was picking up steam. After word of mouth referrals and a fortuitous introduction from Robert, Oliver landed several new clients, including a local bakery that needed a rebrand and a small tech startup that wanted sleek logos and a dynamic web design. With each contract, Oliver grew more confident and excited, carefully setting aside savings for the day his child would arrive. He'd often walk outside at night, slip another coin into the well, and whisper a private thanks for the wave of good fortune. Robert, too, found a glimmer of hope. A consulting opportunity arrived from the same tech startup that Oliver was designing for. They needed financial projections and risk analysis, which Robert could handle on his weekends. Though hectic, it meant extra money for Caroline's tuition and perhaps a little breathing room for the household budget. Through the unexpected synergy of neighborly connections, the Hendersons and Zoe and Oliver were each inching closer to those wordless wishes they'd carried around for months. One crisp evening in late November, with Zoe noticeably sporting a maternity sweater that curved around her growing belly, the two couples gathered near the well for a modest celebration. They wanted to drape a small string of lights around the old structure to lend a festive glow to the yards. As they worked to gently clip the lights in place, they chatted and laughed, warmed by the sense of camaraderie that had blossomed so naturally. Just a few months ago, we were strangers, Zoe reflected as she pressed the battery pack for the string lights. Soft golden bulbs blinked to life, illuminating the well in a charming glow. Now look at us. We're practically partners in each other's success stories. Diane wrapped a crocheted scarf more snugly around her neck, smiling as she watched the lights twinkle. It's like this well saw we needed each other, she said. In a way, it's a reminder that the act of wishing only has real power when people come together to make those dreams happen. Oliver patted the stones fondly. I never believed in magic, but every time I've stood here, I've had a burst of inspiration to keep going. He then glanced at Robert. And thanks to your connections, my business is doing better than ever, which means, well, I'd say my wish came true. Robert shook his head humbly. More like we helped each other. I needed the extra income from that weekend gig, so that's a huge relief for me. In some strange way, we all found solutions through this. Well, or rather, around it. Zoe's eyes misted with emotion as she remembered her reason for wishing in the first place. Helping students who couldn't find a way forward. Diane's community center approach changed everything for those kids, she murmured. I just can't believe how quickly it all came together. Diane reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small handful of coins, distributing one to each person. Let's make another wish together, she suggested with a bright smile. Not because this well is magic, but because we believe in new beginnings and in the kindness that springs from neighbors helping each other. Let's toss a coin in for the future. They stood quietly, each thinking of what new hope they wanted to plant that night. The air felt wondrously still, the hush of the evening interrupted only by a distant barking dog and the faint rustle of dry leaves. One by one, they dropped their coins, each coin landing softly inside the well. No water to echo the toss, but a satisfying clink as metal met stone and slipped away out of sight. The holiday season arrived in a flurry of sparkling lights and cheerful gatherings. Another wave of positivity came when Diane's daughter Caroline flew home from college for winter break. She instantly befriended Zoe and Oliver, enchanted by the idea of a new baby on the block. Caroline also volunteered at Zoe's college prep workshops, regaling the high schoolers with stories of her own freshman year experiences, making them laugh and see themselves in her shoes. It lent the sessions a friendly authenticity that resonated with the teens. December turned to January, and the well between the Hendersons and their neighbors remained a place of quiet reflection. The wind tugged at its lights, now battered from weeks of winter storms, but still shining enough to glow in the dusk. Zoe, bundled in a thick coat and scarf, would often rest her eyes on the well from her living room window. Soon, her pregnancy would lead her to maternity leave. She was both excited and anxious about parenthood, longing for the day she could bring her newborn home. One night, well past midnight, a heavy snow blanketed the town. Diane woke to the sound of howling winds, her mind drifting to the bare trees in the yard. She couldn't resist the impulse to peek out her bedroom window. The well glimmered faintly under the snow, the string of lights half hidden under white drifts. In an uncharacteristic flutter of spontaneity, Diane grabbed a robe and slippers. She tiptoed downstairs out onto the porch. She felt compelled to see it up close, as if the well was calling her name. The snow crunched beneath her feet as she carefully made her way across the yard, hugging the sides of her robe against the chill. Once she reached the old stones, she stood and breathed in the crisp, bracing air. The steady hush of the falling snow soothed her. She placed a gloved hand on top of the well's rim, feeling the cold seep through, and whispered a silent message of gratitude for how far they'd all come. Then a light flicked on from next door. Oliver emerged on his porch, equally curious about the sudden snowfall, or perhaps worried about the noise of the wind. Spotting Diane out there, he stepped off his own porch and trudged carefully through the snow. "You okay?" he asked quietly, his breath materializing in white puffs. She smiled warmly, nodding. "I'm fine. Just wanted to check on our little wishing well in this storm." Oliver chuckled and patted the rim. "Hardy old thing, isn't it? Like all of us, weathering life's storms." They stood there a moment in comfortable silence. Neighbors turned friends, thinking of all the small and big miracles that had stemmed from their shared efforts and kindness. Finally, Diane nodded toward Oliver's house. "Go on in before you catch a cold. We'll talk on a warmer day." He laughed softly. "Will do. Good night." Winter soon gave way to the first whispers of spring. Brown grass gave way to the earliest shoots of green. By March, Zoe was on maternity leave, growing more eager by the day. Diane insisted on helping set up the nursery, gifting Zoe the same rocking chair she had used for Caroline, newly repainted. Meanwhile, Oliver's schedule brimmed with design projects for local businesses, and Robert's consulting side jobs steadily funneled more savings into their college fund. The community center's college workshops continued strong, proving that their neighborly efforts had truly taken root. Then one weekday morning, Diane received a call from Oliver. "Could you come over?" Ha! His voice crackled with excitement. "Zoe's gone into labor." Diane raced next door, finding Zoe sitting on the couch, breathing carefully through mild contractions. The plan had been for Oliver to drive her to the hospital, but he was flustered and needed someone to help them gather everything they needed. Diane corralled them both into the car, reassuring Zoe along the way. The hospital was only a 15-minute drive. By the time they arrived, Zoe's contractions were stronger, but she remained in good spirits, her eyes bright with anticipation. Robert joined them at the hospital a little later, dropping off extra pillows and snacks. As the hours passed in a blur of gentle coaching and excited anticipation, Zoe gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Oliver's eyes brimmed with tears as he held his daughter for the first time. Zoe, exhausted but radiant, gazed down at the tiny life in her arms, feeling the magnitude of the wish she had voiced all those months ago, a hope for a bright future, not just for her own child, but for all the kids she guided. They named the little girl Charlotte. When Diane and Robert came by to see the new arrival, they felt privileged to witness the joy bubbling in that hospital room. Zoe cradled Charlotte as Oliver marveled over impossibly delicate fingers and toes. Soon, the conversation turned to the day they had first discovered the old well. Zoe let out a soft laugh. "I did say my wish was for this baby to have all the blessings in the world," she said, brushing a gentle fingertip across Charlotte's cheek. "And here she is, our own miracle." When Zoe and Oliver brought Charlotte home 2 days later, the Hendersons had been busy, quietly preparing a welcome. They arranged bright balloons, pink ribbons, and a small banner near the well. A sign read, "Welcome home, Charlotte." Diane also left a basket of diapers, onesies, and gift cards near the front porch. When Oliver pointed out the decorations to Zoe, she sank onto the couch, tears in her eyes, deeply touched by their neighbor's generosity. Words failed her as she stepped onto the porch for the first time, carefully holding Charlotte against her shoulder. Oliver slipped an arm around his wife's waist, both gazing at the lovingly crafted display. Over at the Henderson home, Diane and Robert stood at their own bay window, smiling softly, not wanting to intrude on the intimate arrival, but eager to see their neighbor's reaction. Days later, once Zoe felt settled, they all convened at the well baby, Charlotte in tow, sporting a fuzzy pink hat. The weather was warming into a gentle springtime sun, and tiny buds spread across the hedges. Diane passed around a small basket of coins again, but this time there was a new kind of hush, as if each of them recognized the well was more than a whimsical project. It was a symbol of their choice to unite and help each other. Robert bent down near Charlotte and held a tiny coin in front of her. "All right, Charlotte," he said softly. "You're going to make the first wish this spring, even if you don't know what it is yet," Oliver laughed, guiding his daughter's small hand. "Let's hope for something good, shall we?" He gently helped Charlotte drop the coin into the well. Zoe felt her eyes tear up with emotion. She pressed her cheek to Oliver's shoulder, and they simply breathed in the moment. Then Diane and Robert took their turns, each silently reflecting on the journey that had brought them to that day. Two families, once strangers, forever changed by simple acts of kindness. As their coins clinked softly in the well's depths, they felt the warmth of belonging bloom within. Deanne closed her eyes, remembering the moment she'd peeked through the hedges and seen Zoe beside the old, overgrown stones. She thought about how one kindness had spiraled into another, how each dream they nurtured had been quietly supported by the whole group. In a world too often weighed down by cynicism, they had discovered an oasis of generosity right there between their homes. When Diane opened her eyes, she noticed the sunlight shifting across the stones, illuminating the fresh spring growth at the base. With a gentle smile, she realized that hope, like spring, could melt away the frost of uncertainty. The old wishing well might just be stone and timber, but it had sparked the best in all of them. No one spoke for a moment as they stood there, absorbing the quiet miracle of good neighbors turned dear friends. Eventually, the baby let out a soft coo, drawing them back to reality. Zoe pressed a kiss onto Charlotte's forehead, then turned toward Diane and Robert. "I think she's hungry," she joked. "But thank you for being here with us. Really, we can't thank you enough for everything." Diane stepped forward, placing a hand on Zoe's arm. "You've enriched our lives more than you know, Zoe. All of you have. This well might have no magical powers, but our willingness to help each other is what made all our wishes come true." They shared a knowing look, an unspoken promise that they would continue to care for one another through all of life's twists. And as they retreated to their homes, Charlotte nestled in her parents' arms. That quiet circle of stone bore lasting witness to the unbreakable bond formed by two neighboring families who dared to wish and then dared to make those wishes a reality.